On today's episode, Chloe and I are joined by Greg Lehman. Greg is a public figure, I guess, and he's also a chiropractor, a physiotherapist, a kinesiologist. He's a published researcher, and we talk about specific compared to general exercise for pain, when it might be a good idea to do specific exercises and when you don't need to, poking into pain, when that's a good plan and when it's not, skateboarding at the age of 43, optimism for knee osteoarthritis, and lots of other fun stuff. So stick around. Okay, we're here with Greg Lehman. Greg, awesome to be with you.
Thank you. You too.
Hi, Greg.
Yo.
Yo. This is very exciting. I've been looking forward to this for weeks. So, yeah, it's nice to see you and hear you, which is yeah. Thanks for coming. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah.
Hey, Greg, your course, Reconciling Biomechanics with Pain Science, and also your presentation at the San Diego Pain Summit that I attended a few years back, were one of the best courses and certainly the best comedy presentation I've ever experienced. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
I just keep recycling the same jokes.
They're very good. It was
it's good for the environment at least.
When I did your course as well, your jokes were definitely a standout as well. And I think that's how I first got to know about you, Greg. I feel like maybe Raph posted something.
You were on fire at the San Diego Pain Summit presentation. I posted it on socials, and
which
people
one?
Were cracking up all over the world.
I've done two.
Oh, it was just
which extremely funny one?
I can't even remember exactly what it was about, but I just remember you kind of like striding up and down the stage, ranting sarcastically about things.
Yeah, might have been hungover.
And my other favorite video is you and your daughter in Mimi.
Oh yeah,
doing the teaching the first step.
Yeah. I repost it because I love watching her in that one.
How old is she now?
She's 8, just turned 8. She might have been 3 there, I think.
Yeah, she was little. It's the absolute best, and it doesn't lose anything with multiple watches. I just keep watching it over and over again.
That kid's funny. She's so funny. Her timing was perfect.
It was really good, wasn't it? Yeah.
So, Greg, we've got a few things we want to talk about today, but what I want to start off with is something that's I see a lot of people struggling with, which is given that in most cases exercise doesn't really need to be specific, right? So if we have a sore knee, we don't need to do VMO activation. If we have a sore back, we don't need to retrain our glutes to fire or get our transversus timing. So we can just basically just get moving. Right? And there's a whole bunch of non-specific contextual factors that are really important around our expectation and our self-efficacy and all of that other stuff. But, whether we do glute bridges or squats, really doesn't matter. So given this is the case, a lot of people struggle with this kind of falling into this nihilistic pit of despair. It's like, well, what good am I? Okay, if I'm a movement teacher and it doesn't matter if you do squats or lunges, and if you're doing squats or lunges, it doesn't matter if I'm telling you to activate your glutes or not, and it doesn't matter if I'm cueing your knees to go out over your toes. So what the fuck good am I? What am I here for? Why am I charging? Like, why don't I just go and do nothing and sit on the couch and cry, and you just go over there and move however you want? What's the point of me? So yeah, how do we reconcile that?
Yeah, so the idea, I always, if you remember, we start my course with the question when do you have to be specific, right? Or when are there cases where specificity might help more? I still think there are some cases, but it's just not what we've always led to believe. So. So biomechanics can kind of matter if you're working someone, because you could have another target for the exercise prescription rather than pain, right? So it's really pain where it doesn't matter too much.
Correct.
You're going to get these analgesic effects and help people with pain with a lot of different options. So then what's great is you can tailor your exercise to someone via some other target where they might say, I want to develop my glutes for aesthetics. I want to get stronger or fitter for this sport. Like you're working with a runner and someone wants to be more efficient in their running. So then you would choose, back exercises that would help their running. Or you work with someone who's 30 and they're worried about their bone density because their parents have like hip fractures or something. So then you choose exercises that develop bone density or minimize the risk of sarcopenia. Or, maybe someone just wants to be more well-rounded and fit, and you notice the way they do an exercise, like the glute bridge one, it's really back focused. And you're like, well, it could be worthwhile to make it more of an emphasis on their hips. Or they might be like, well, I want to develop my back. So you switch up the exercise to make it more of a back extensor one. Or they've had hamstring issues. So you think, you know what, maybe we load the hamstrings more, and you change it that way. So there's all these other targets that you can have besides like the classic, ones of how you choose an exercise.
Okay, so point number one is, all right, so point number 0 is, this I should have said that at the start, is we're contextualizing this to helping people with pain. And point number 1 there is, well, you can actually choose, kind of particular targets, or even, I'm going to use the word, specific targets for exercises. Like I want to give you more eccentric hamstring strength, or I want to, increase the size of your butt, so you'd have to go up a pant size, or whatever it might be. But that's not in relation to the pain. It's just in relation to what's some other life goal that this person has, that we can, create some kind of meaning around this exercise for them.
Yeah, exactly. That's it, exactly. And then all the time you're wondering, always challenge your bias. Is there something specific needed? So I tend to think like, if someone has a hamstring tear, well, we know that they'll benefit from other exercises that have nothing to do with the hamstrings for pain. But for maybe if they're returning to sprinting, then you probably want to build them up to tolerate the demands of sprinting, heavier, faster, end range, type activities. So like you're always wondering, is it better to bias ourselves toward a little bit of specificity just to cover all your bases, just in case.
Right, but the specificity based on their so personal or sport goals, or if we're talking about an injury like a muscle tear or something like that, then yes, obviously that is more of a specific. If you're rehabbing a hamstring tear, biceps curls probably aren't going to do as much good as hamstring curls, for example.
Yeah, you know what though? I think there's like a paper that came out like today. I just heard about it for muscle tears, where you can do these general non-specific ones and it'll still help someone for pain and function, but it just won't make that damaged muscle that much stronger. And there are some cases where like strength or mobility might be quite relevant to develop, to return someone to sport. Mm-hmm. So like the higher the demands, the more specific the injury, you could probably say there's more relevance in a specific exercise.
All right. So I want to tease that apart for a minute, because I'd just like to double click on understand and on what you mean by high demands and specific injury, because I think people are probably thinking, oh well, if I've got a disc bulge, that's a specific injury, and therefore I need to activate my glutes or something like that. So what do you mean by specific?
So I'm thinking something like a hamstring tear, something like an ACL tear, so you tear a ligament, something like an Achilles tendinopathy. So let's say people are just returning to walking, like really low level demands, then they don't need to be too specific. You need to load around those areas. But if you're a 17-year-old girl and you're returning to soccer, you probably really need to load those areas and develop as much, everything that contributes to capacity, like power, strength in all ranges of motion. Whatever the demands of the sport are, you probably want to make sure that you've prepared the person to do it. So those are like specific cases.
Right.
With the disc one, I think and people could totally debate me on this one. This is just a personal opinion. Like, I think the specific question you ask is like, do we expose or protect? Is it worth backing off? Like, do you have to change how someone moves to give them some pain control? So they're not doing the thing that really aggravates them. And I think there's a role for avoidance sometimes. And so a specific exercise would be, hey, don't do that thing that aggravates you. Barely advanced.
Yeah, what's that meme that's going on social media
Yeah.
where there's the photo and the guy says, hey, doc, it really hurts every time I do this. And the doctor says, well, don't do that then.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
But the thing is, this is what's funny with like Pilates or exercise prescription. Some people do, and I've just made this up, I call them accidental endurance copers. They don't even mean to, but for whatever reason, they keep doing something that aggravates them. And that's where the trainer or the coach or the therapist comes in, or the instructor, like, oh, you're doing this, and they don't even realize it. So you teach them a new way to move, and it feels dramatically better sometimes. And they're like, I had no idea that I could do it that way.
So, all right. So when we're rehabbing an acute injury like a muscle tear or a ligament sprain or rupture, Achilles tendon injury, I agree. There's definitely a place for progressively, initially protecting that area and then, progressively loading the area. For instance, in the case of an ACL injury, the aggravating or the dangerous position is where the knee's, slightly bent and in valgus, and you're doing a cutting maneuver, like basically changing direction, whilst running. And so that's the position we want to avoid initially. So we start out bilateral and sagittal plane straight ahead movement, and then we eventually, have to progress that person to doing like sideways hops and standing on a bosu and, all of those basically sort of potentially injurious, situations. And we have to, progressively load their tissues, and we have to know the tissue healing time is going to be like a 12-month, 15-month, 18-month process till that tendon, which is going to be a grafted tendon off their hamstring or their quadriceps tendon or patellar tendon, is going to reach full strength just based on the physiology. And so we know it's going to be like a 12-month plus process, and we know we've got to initially strengthen that whole area but avoid that position, and then progressively we've got to, move towards that position and explosive, change direction and, unpredictable situations and so on. And so that to me, that is, I'm in full agreement there that there is, it's like, okay, so if we just did a program of, say, push-ups and upper body strength, for that person, it's not going to be as effective, So absolutely there's a case there or a situation there for doing, I guess a specific exercise. But even within that, I mean, if you look at, I'm just teaching ACL rehab at the moment, actually in the diploma this week. And so, we look at the tissues that are synergists of the ACL, so tissues that basically, are backup systems for the ACL. So the IT band, the distal insertion of the IT band is parallel with the ACL. The pes anserinus, which is the common tendon of the gracilis, the sartorius, and the semitendinosus, is synergist. The hamstrings and quadriceps and, stabilize the knee. The gastrocnemius plays a role. It's like, by the time you get to there, it's like, that's all the leg muscles, that's the flexors, extensors, abductors, adductors, etc., the knee, hip, and ankle. And it's like, what does strengthening all of those muscles look like? It looks like a squat or a lunge,
Yeah.
So,
the only thing I'd say with that, though, is this is where I actually think one area we want to be pretty specific. I would still advocate like a quadricep extension in a machine, because you can do the lunge and protect the quad. You can you can shift your weight. So sometimes if that's where we still have a role where you see how someone's movement habits, and you can't even really see it that well unless it's extreme. So that's where you want to like make sure you cross all your T's and that stuff and dot your I's.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so in that situation, and then probably something similar applies into hamstring tears or Achilles rehab. So you need to work that body part, to protect against future injury. But in most situations where someone has patellofemoral pain, or so basically knee pain, non-specific knee pain, related to running or stair climbing or things like that. or non-specific back pain with or without disc bulge, with or without spondylolisthesis, with or without facet joint arthritis, etc., etc. Non-specific shoulder pain, formerly known as shoulder impingement, etc. So the list could go on and on, but what's the role, if any, of specific exercise in those?
I think you need to be more specific if someone's returning. Like, you need to match the demands of what someone's returning to.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But if it's pretty non-specific demands, then your exercise is going to be pretty non-specific. And again, I think the more important question is expose or protect, or expose or back off. So it's easy that way. You're guessing, when do I need to do a knee exercise? And usually, you can wait, just do all these other things first. And then you start doing the knee exercise. What I think is I'm just going to change. This is a question you should ask me.
Okay, great. Thanks for the tip.
We know we need to build back up. And I always wonder, do you need to do like boring, if say it's a runner or someone who hikes or does trampoline, do you need to do boring old knee exercises, squats or lunges, or can you use the goal activity as the stimulus to adapt?
Well, I was thinking about that actually when you were talking about rehabbing hamstring tears before to the demands of sprinting, because we know that the demands on hamstrings of sprinting, I can't remember the exact number, it's like quadruple the amount of a hamstring curl or something, right? Yeah. So it's like the maximum load you're ever going to experience on your hamstring is during sprinting. So if you've got to be conditioned to the demands of sprinting, surely your program's got to include some sprinting.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, I think the debate there is, once you have an injury, do you have to develop some other attribute to account or accommodate for that injury? So like if you have an Achilles tendinopathy, the best way to prepare the Achilles tendon for running is to run and to hop and to skip, but you probably won't build up the tendon, the stiffness of the tendon, because you need to be loading it for like a 3-second duration. So is that does it need something else that you don't get in the goal activity, or does the hamstring tear need something else that it doesn't get in the goal activity of sprinting? And so because I don't know, I'm like belts and suspenders, do both. Absolutely do the sprinting and do some heavy resistance training and get healthy and sleep better and do push-ups and core work and calf work and shoulder presses.
All right, I can just imagine the program that you're writing for me to rehab my Achilles tear. It's a very big program.
Well, you should see the Jordan Menduchiga program for hamstring tears. I always show the program and don't say what the injury is for, and it's awesome. And then people have to guess, and then I say it's for the hamstring. I'm like, could it be for an ACL? Yeah. Could it be for back pain? Yeah. Could it be for knee pain? Yeah. It's so comprehensive. Everyone says we don't want to throw the kitchen sink at it, and I'm like, what's wrong with kitchen sinks?
I love that.
This is maybe the right thing to do.
I want to delve in a little bit more, Greg, and you've mentioned it throughout that conversation, then in regards to poking into pain. When might we want to poke into pain? When might we want to pull back? Because I know a really common thing I hear from instructors, Pilates instructors, which are our predominant listeners of the show, and newer instructors and, more experienced instructors, is really they're fearing their client's pain, and they're really nervous that, if their client's feeling any pain, that they're actually going to be potentially hurting that client or causing further damage. That's a common thought process that's going through an instructor's mind. So I'm just wondering, and then conversely, you've got the client who is feeling the same. It's like, well, if I'm feeling pain, I'm re-injuring myself, or I'm further damaging myself, or et cetera, et cetera. So there can kind of be this fear coming from both sides. And I know you're doing a lot of that at the moment with your YouTube series. So I'd love you to kind of chat about your thoughts on that.
It's an important question. And I would say, like, we know we're safe to poke into pain, and before you do it, probably the criteria is you have to understand the pain. So you got to get checked out. You have to know why it's your pain. Is it your usual pain? If it's some new pain that just came out of nowhere, and it's super sharp or different, then I wouldn't necessarily poke into it. But if you
Gotcha.
understand the pain, you've been checked out, you know that the pain doesn't mean, well, it could be something horrible like, you know, cancer or something like that. Or it's, you know, if you just had a fall and maybe you actually have a fracture somewhere, then you want to shut it down. But if it's their normal
So we've
pain,
ruled out red flags.
yeah, for sure. So like normal pain, like this is what people say, well, I'm like, yeah, you're totally safe. Pain is not always the best guide. We're allowed to poke into pain, see how you feel a couple days from now. If you're no worse a few days from now, and if the general long-term trend is you're getting better, then great. We're allowed to keep poking in. The other idea, people will say, well, what if I actually do have tissue damage? And I say, even better, because then we have way more evidence that it's actually safe to poke into pain, and it might even be helpful. You know, with the same criteria, you're not really flaring up the next day or 2 days later, because we can't always trust what we feel. So you're allowed to poke into it. And then there's the third set of people, and this is kind of me, who like always have some persistent pain. Past 3 months, it's been my ankles and for some reason my hip. And if I just wait for that to go away, I will never do anything. So it's so often I poke into pain for half, like I'm going, and I have a frozen shoulder now too. I think I have some systemic shit going on. Anyways.
Yeah, I saw that. You put up some posting of you trampolining. You're like, this was before the frozen shoulder, or just when the frozen, and I didn't realize you'd had a frozen shoulder. I'd love to talk more about that too.
I didn't know until January, and then January was like, I thought it was just a shoulder thing, and I kept poking and pushing into pain and whatever. And I'm going rock climbing tonight. For like the first time since our lockdown, like a year and a half ago. But I haven't climbed the past year because my shoulder, I'm like, you know what? It's going to hurt, but who cares? I know why it hurts.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make it worse. It's not going to freeze it more. Like, it's just going to hurt, but I want to go climbing. So whatever. That's
So
like easy. That
so
sounds
there's a
so
key
callous, eh? Just suck it up. I just know what I mean. But like, I understand what's going on.
Yeah. Like, and I totally get it.
Safe.
Yeah, right. Okay. So you understand what's going on, so you feel safe. It's interesting because my dad's very much the same. He has OA in his hands and in his elbow, and he, you know, basically says to me, well, it hurts if I don't, it hurts if I do. I love exercising. I feel better when I exercise.
Done.
You know, from all the other things that exercise gives me. So the fact that it hurts when I exercise is like whatever, right? So that's interesting. So how do we? So we've really got to go about. I mean, to me, it sounds like it's obviously like everything else. It's really important to build therapeutic alliance with your clients. It's important not to fear your client's pain, and it sounds like we need to add in some education there with our clients. They're the sort of...
That's it. And really understand it. I always like pain gets a seat at the table, but it's not, you know, the CEO. That's it. It's just one voice.
Pain gets a seat at the table, but it's not the CEO. It's one voice. That's freaking awesome, Greg.
Yeah, we're not North Korea.
Was that a Pilates Elephants exclusive? Have you said that before? That was quite profound, I thought.
It's a new one. I don't do a lot of dictator jokes, but what the heck?
We've got an exclusive. I was hoping for a Greg Lehman exclusive. That's fantastic. Okay, so right, so we want to poke into pain, and when we don't want to poke into pain, sometimes, yeah. Okay.
All right, and so red flags aside. Okay, so we've ruled out cancer or a fracture, osteoporotic fracture, or systemic inflammation, whatever it might be. And I've had the pain for 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever it might be. It's my sore shoulder, sore knee, sore hip, and so when might it not, in that context, when might it not be a good plan to poke into pain?
So you can always. This is the point where we can always experiment. I think there's a subset of people if we had to label them, we'd call them like endurance copers. And they might not realize that actually I think you more see it in yoga than you do in Pilates, where people are very restricted in that there's one right way to do a posture. So someone might be an endurance coper and it always hurts, and you could make just tiny little changes in how they move and it might feel better. So there's a subset of people where maybe it is worth changing. So I would go back to that. Like, it's worth backing off if you haven't actually tried to back off or make certain modifications. That you see it in runners, right? Like, I very rarely change gait, but sometimes it's worthwhile. Like the NeoA, and they're big heel strikers with long strides, and it's just been hurting for like a year. That might be, and they're still running, maybe not as much as they want. That might be worth trying to change how they move and see if they can run with a little less pain. Yeah.
Right, because we know that shorter strides put less, pressure on up through the leg, right?
Yeah.
Less ground reaction force. Yeah. So, all right. So let's. I think we're almost done with this, but I just want to unpack just for a moment, or maybe not for a moment, what you said about changing movement, because when I hear you say that, okay, so I think like, all right, so I don't know, maybe I'm bench pressing and it hurts my shoulder, and so you change the way I bench press and it doesn't hurt anymore. Or maybe I'm squatting and it hurts my hip, so you change the way I'm squatting, it doesn't hurt anymore. What I understand you to mean, because I know your context, is that I think you're just thinking like, okay, well, your systems become sensitized to this particular condition, this particular pattern, this particular position. So it's kind of like conditioned almost. And if you just change the position, it's like it changes the context sometimes just enough that your central nervous system perceives it as a different context, and it doesn't trigger that sort of alarm response.
Could be.
Yeah. But I imagine that a lot of people listening to this are thinking that you're thinking about some kind of arcane physiotherapist knowledge of biomechanics, that you're watching me bench press and go, oh no, you're using your pronator teres, too much in that movement. So I'm going to get your fingers more spaced apart to deactivate that a bit or whatever. So yeah, can you unpack that a bit for us?
Yeah, so it's really hard. It could be the way you said it. I actually went to Switzerland and I gave, it was at a running conference, and I gave a case for changing running that had nothing to do with nociception or and I talked about what you were talking about, associative learning and all of that stuff. But it could be so again, let me talk about myself. So with my shoulder, the frozen shoulder, I was trying to do lots of squatting the last year. I want to build up my squat. And after a while, it was just killing a regular back squat holding onto the bar. So my genius training, I bought a safety squat bar where you hold the bar in front of you. Like simple things like that. I don't know if that's associative learning. There's certainly a change in the stress on the shoulder, right? It could have been as simple as nociception. So sometimes it is like you're just changing the stress on the tissue, and that feels better. But I never pretend to know exactly what it is. It doesn't matter. We'll just go around and change stuff. Or, sometimes people feel better when they squat and they push their knees out. Like, I'm not worried about knee valgus, but if it feels better, then go for it. Or if you have a pinching in the front of your hip, why not turn your foot out when you're golfing? Like that's on the follow through of the golf swing. So yeah, I don't know the mechanism. I would just say have people play around. And then that's what I mean by movement optimism. If you play around, you think all of these are acceptable ways to move. It opens up all these options. So the one that feels
Isn't that
better
interesting?
for you, go for it.
Isn't that interesting? I did some reading last year on the factors that predict academic success. And I looked at a few systematic reviews on adult online tertiary learning, because we were pivoting to adult online tertiary learning, so I wanted to understand, how to help people most effectively. And there was one thing that just came to mind as you were saying that, is about computer use, and it's because online learning, obviously, being unable to use computers at a high level, people can't even upload a document or open their e-learning platform or whatever, is an impediment to success in online education. But actually what this one systematic review teased out was that it actually wasn't the level of computer knowledge that was important. It was what they termed computer playfulness. So basically what that is that if you don't know what the hell you're doing, right, but you just start clicking on shit until something does what you want it to, then you're going to be fine. But if you sit there paralyzed, worried that if you click on the wrong thing, you're going to crash the system or, delete all your files off your computer by accident, then you paralyze and you end up not being able to proceed and achieve what you want. And that struck me as very similar to what you just described in terms of movement optimism. Just try some different shit, experiment, explore around, see if you find something that works.
Yeah, and that's why even those who have a very kinesiopathological model of pain, there's still value in talking to them to see what tools they have to teach people to move differently. You just don't have to ascribe to their philosophy, right? So I don't know if you guys know Shirley Sarman, very famous physio in North America. I've taken her
diagnosis
courses.
And treatment of movement impairment syndromes.
Yeah, I don't believe in her philosophy, but I know I could learn a ton from her. Or like Mulligan or someone like that, just the way they coax people to move differently. They just have their hands on them there, and that worked for me too. Try that as well.
What's your current position on Mulligan? Not Mulligan per se, but on mobilisations with movement, because I know that at one stage a few years ago you were, a sort of moderate advocate for those
you know what?
techniques.
So people tell me there's still the patients I'm seeing don't really demand a certain type of therapy, but I think if I was back in private practice 6 days a week at like more traditional place, I'm sure I'd have people really demanding and wanting manual therapy. And that's probably the style that I would give something like that, because it's very open to like experimentation and your own style. Mulligan is exactly what you said about people playing with their computer without worrying about crashing Facebook for 6 hours, right? Like you just this will be dated 6 what?
No, we slept. The funny thing was we slept through that. I think Australia was pretty much asleep through all that drama. And I woke up in the morning and I'm like, oh, why is my Instagram being annoying? It's like, and I just thought it was my problem, and I thought my internet on my phone was down. I was like, oh, that's annoying. And then I just saw that the whole world had basically shut down because Facebook, Instagram, and whatever else they control.
I wonder what the stats were on mental health for that day.
Probably a mixed bag. Some people were probably better, some were worse.
But I heard Twitter was just alive with awesomeness and just totally taking the piss. So because Twitter was king for a day. I love that. With movement optimism, and I feel like, Raph, we didn't do any intro of Greg at the beginning of the podcast today. Was that because you've chatted with Greg before, so we're making an assumption that
we've had Greg
everyone
on
knows
before.
Everyone knows who Greg is.
At the end of the show, I'll just do a little summary of what we talked about.
There we go.
And then we'll pop that at the start. So, on today's show, we're going to talk with Greg Lehman, who's a chiropractor and physiotherapist and kinesiologist, and has released various papers on biomechanics.
Is he? Are you a
kinesiologist?
Yeah,
you are.
That's what my master's is in.
So this is something that fascinates me about you, Greg, and I think something that a lot of people can learn from, and I'm curious to understand more. So from my knowledge of you, you started off, your first training was a lot more biomechanic, potentially,
it
more
was
the biomedical model. And
but I wasn't wedded to the biomedical. That was so neat about my training. It was first in McMaster, then Waterloo. I just tweeted today that it was a John Sarno thing, who's sort of the most popular, biopsychosocialist. I read his book when I was like 19, when I did my undergrad in kinesiology in the 90s. And then even when I did my master's, I was writing about central sensitization, and our biomechanics, different professors were teaching us that if you just go into an industry and change their postures and how they lift, that'll help some people. But you have to look at the other variables, all the psychosocial factors. So we knew all this stuff in the 90s.
Right. Okay, cool. There we go.
I was pretty lucky. I got introduced to this stuff quite early.
Yeah, that is super cool. Okay, well, that answers that for me, because really your movement optimism, I'm not sure if you've seen, but pretty much you can go on to any of a Breathe education grad or students bio and find movement optimist in their bio. You've really, so I'd say like maybe a lot of our listeners don't know that you
trademarked it.
You coined it. I mean, we've got the, I call you the OG, the original gangster, movement optimist. And it's been something that has really captured the motivation, the inspiration, and kind of like what we want to do
Oh, that's great.
Which is so cool. So thank you. I feel like we're all probably, I mean, I loved hearing your interpretation of what you mean by movement optimism. And I think what we probably do is we all take on some sort of what movement optimism means to us. And I guess for me, it really has been around learning and inherently believing that we are anti-fragile and adaptable and as opposed to thinking of us as like machines that ultimately break down with wear and tear. For me, that's kind of been the biggest thing, because I was not a movement optimist. When I first studied to be a Pilates instructor, I came from, having the bulge disc and all of that, and was told not to flex, and truly believed that. And it kind of stopped me pretty much moving with any sort of freedom for a year. It stopped me from running. It stopped me from basically doing all the things I loved, and it stopped me from feeling empowered in my body, basically. So for me, it's been quite the journey to get to a place where, I am a huge believer in adaptability and movement optimism, and you've been a huge influence on me in that, Greg. So thank you. And I know, and you, I really, really appreciate that.
I only started it because I wanted to slouch because I was too lazy to sit up straight. That was it. It was purely for myself.
Greg,
I'm a proponent of slouching.
And if I put on weight, I wanted to be able to run a marathon without someone telling me I have to lose weight.
I want to ask you on the back of Chloe's what you just said about people having movement optimists in their bio, which I've noticed as well. Or the other sort of variation is fearless movement, which I think is awesome. And shout out to you if you've got that in your bio.
Yeah, hell yeah.
But I wanted to just kind of get your perspective on the phenomenon of basically, I guess it's with love. It's the kind of the reformed smoker, phenomenon of, once you become, quotes, woke to this, biopsychosocial stuff, and you realise, the disc bulge isn't like the sole and only cause of your back pain, and you can bend and be safe. And, all of a sudden you have this, many of us, I think all of us just about, have this sort of almost compulsive need to just tell everyone that, and educate everyone. So we want to educate. But how can I educate my clients? How can I let my clients walk out, still believing?
We know that was me,
blah, blah,
Raph.
blah.
We know that was me when I first learned it.
This isn't veiled at you, Chloe. I see this everywhere, right? So I see people, I was having some interesting discussions with actually Daniel Arbilla on Instagram last week, and we were talking about, if a client came in and said, they wanted VMO activation exercises for their knee pain, and we know that VMO activation is no better than just general quadriceps strengthening for patellofemoral pain. Would you give that? Given that they expected it to help more than any other thing, and they, so would there be a problem with giving that? And me, I don't have a problem with if you came into me and had a strongly held belief that VMO activation or specific rotator cuff targeting or some other thing was going to help your pain, even though I know that, we could exercise the other arm and help just as much.
Glute activation, Raph?
Glute activation, whatever it is, right? And, so I would ask, okay, so why do you think that? And, so I'd unpack that a little bit and see if you were just didn't really know, but you read it on Google one time and it's not a strongly held belief, then we'd just move on. But if you were like, no, this is really impacting my life, I'm totally focused on it, I can't let go of it, it's, it's really important to me, I would go, okay, great, well, let's look at your VMO, or let's look at your whatever it is, muscle, your glute activation or whatever. And I would be quite happy to do some kind of bogus VMO activation by tapping your VMO and going, your patella is tracking a bit better now that you're doing, I would be happy to send you on your way with a pat on the butt going, yeah, Greg, you did a great job of activating your VMO. I think your knee's going to be a lot better, But Daniel was, not really, he was a little bit uncomfortable with the notion of sending you away with a narrative that then you go away and tell your friends and they say,
totally agree with Daniel.
Raph helped you with your knee pain. And you're like, yeah, you should go and see him. He's the VMO guy. My VMO wasn't working. He really fixed it for me. You should get your VMO fixed as well. And so, promoting this narrative. And so, yeah, I guess, where do you sit, or what advice do you have to, to people on this? How much is it our role to educate either our clients or our other practitioners, right? And how much is it just our role to help people feel better and get back to doing the things they love?
Yeah, both. Of course, I'd say that. So I think you got to make that call. Do you think this belief is getting in the way of their recovery? And because sometimes you can have a negative belief and it could be really entrenched, but it doesn't need to be addressed to help that person. And so I don't always address negative things, especially I think that they're not really going to be harmful for them. So the VMO idea, I'd probably fall somewhere in between the two of you, where I'd be like, oh, that can easily be addressed, and then I'd explain the multidimensional nature of pain. I'd say there's probably some other things we should work on as well. We could do some VMO work with this. Well, it's called a squat. You know what I mean? Like, plus we could work on these other things. So that I would kind of view that more of like patient preference, because that's another way to choose an exercise. What are you interested in doing? What exercises do you like to do?
100%.
I'd fall under there. I would be slightly not talking too much about the VMO, and I'd acknowledge it, but maybe focus on something else that it helps explain their pain. I don't know if I'd initially come out and disabuse them of the idea. As they start getting better, then I might start introducing the idea, not to worry too much about the VMO.
I love that, Greg. I'm so on board with that. Raph, I think we see that a lot with, and you, Raph, you and I hear you having that convo with Daniel, but come on, you and I have had many a debate about this exact thing on elephants. And my stance, and my stance would sit with Daniel. And also what Greg's just said, I love that. I think we see this a lot with, it's the classic, the client that comes to the Pilates class because they're sure they've got a weak core and that is the cause of their persisting low back pain, right? That is such a common narrative, either that or their butt muscles have gone to sleep. So I think, Raph, if I loop back to what you were saying, potentially when I first learned about multifactorial nature of pain, et cetera, and I'm thinking, okay, this person's got persisting pain, yada, yada, I think I might have been a little bit more, let me educate you why that's not a thing. Whereas now the way I work with my clients is very much what Greg just said there, where absolutely I can give them some exercises that, where they, feel like I can far out. You're in a Pilates class. I can certainly work your core. I can certainly work your butt, or, I can tap into all of those things, but then also work them towards a more empowered, self-efficacy and belief back in, the ability of their own body. So that's kind of where I would go with it. Hey, Greg, have the butt muscles of the world gone to sleep?
Seems that way.
I love that this blog keeps coming up, and you know what? Every now and then, I have these feelings, Raph. I get excited that potentially the industry has changed. And when I say the industry, Greg, I'm particularly here talking about the Pilates industry. And I think, because we're in a little bit of a bubble in the sense that we have all these amazing breathe education grads out there that, have movement optimism in their bio and fully believe in adaptability of the body and et cetera, et cetera.
And just Pilates Elephants listeners who aren't
Pilates, absolutely, and Pilates Elephants listeners, et cetera. Shout out to our listeners. But what I'm saying is every now and then I get a little bit like, oh, yeah, it's all changed. Woo, we don't need to elevate the health industry anymore. It's there. We've made it. And then in that same week, I see so much fuckery. It's like, these, the big crosses and the big ticks about how if you're doing a fucking ab curl, you sure as hell better not be flexing your spine. What? And just all this dead set. By the way, we swear on this, and we haven't sworn much this episode, so I thought I may as well get them all in one go. But I saw, I had a week the other week where it was just like bullshit after bullshit after bullshit from big accounts too. Like, and it's annoying. It's always the account that's got the 100+ followers, etc. Where they're really getting some traction on this stuff, and it just perpetuates this BS. It's like. So, I guess we've got to keep, what are your thoughts on it? How do we asked Adam the same thing when we had Adam Meekins on recently. NAF Physio podcast, your podcast pal there.
Yeah.
And we asked him the same sort of question, you know, what can we do? What do you think we can do to keep elevating, to keep, you know, calling out do we call out the bullshit? What do we do? What are your thoughts on it, Greg? I'd love to hear your opinion.
It's incredibly tough. I think some of it, like, again, you got to make the call how egregious it is, you know, because this is the irony. Sometimes, like, a negative assumption about the body, oh, the glutes, you know, become inhibited with pain, or this is or even without pain, it's just because you're sitting. That, I think that's wrong. There's not a lot of research for that. I don't know. I know how it became so entrenched. So I think it's worth, you know, challenging that idea. But then the irony of that is it ends up leading to, like, good, healthy activities like strength train and, you know, squat and be active. That's the worst part of it. So the people that perpetuate these ideas, they still do some good out there. You know what I mean? Like,
because they've got people moving, they've got people inspired to exercise. Right. Yeah.
That's the issue. That's where I have. And so it's like, you know, how much do we want to quibble? You know, at what point? And are they really hurting people? Right. That's what I'm not. Do you know what I mean? The worst messaging is like, oh, you have hip osteoarthritis, you have to stop running and squatting and doing Pilates.
Right.
Yeah. But, like, oh, if you strength train, you got to make sure you know, warm up your glutes. Well, I mean, it's not true, but whatever. You know, it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah. No, I'm liking looking at that. And to be honest, I haven't really looked at it through that lens before. So you're helping me chill a little, Greg, which is nice. I feel like a little, like, maybe I'll have less Instagram rage now. That's nice. Like, thank you.
So this is just kind of a moderately selfish question, Greg. What do you do, you know, because you're a, what do they call it, a public figure these days? You know, when you're on your Instagram profile, your occupation is listed as public figure.
Oh, is it?
I think that, I don't know. I don't know what yours is, but I think that you kind of are. You're in the public domain a lot these days. So. You've got a podcast, you've got a YouTube channel, you're pretty big on social media, I see on Twitter, you know. So, and you're, you know, you take some relatively controversial stances on things.
They're just the right stances. I don't know.
That's true. So
you do like to blow Twitter up.
So what's your, you know, what's your approach when someone, just say you make a post or a Twitter thing, or, you know, you tweet whatever, and then someone disagrees in the comments, and it's a very, you know, maybe it's a respectful disagreement, but you look at it and you go, oh, it's so wrong, and I'd have to explain the first 5 layers of critical thinking, and, you know.
Yeah, so those ones are tough. That's actually, I don't do much of that. And when they're so wrong and that's hard. But if someone disagrees and they present a counter argument, then I always want to, okay, tell me more. Why do you think that? What leads to this thinking? You know, what's the evidence for this? And then I like to have discussions about evidence and why we know what we know. As long as people go into it, like, that's called that's a dialectic, where you're not having a debate to prove someone wrong. Mm-hmm. Although it's probably always in the back of your mind. It's more just for you to get a little closer to the truth. So that's kind of the discussions or debates that I'm into now, you know. And this is what sometimes I'll go out of my way to, like, here's what I don't know, and I wish this, and I hope that people will reciprocate. They never do. Often they just double down and tell me I don't know anything. Like, well, I'm trying to give you a bone here, but, like, you know, like, so that's how I try to engage in public debates, is that type of openness, looking for common ground. But then at some point, you know, thinking, I know, like, I want to prove to them, I know what you're saying. Like, it's not that I don't understand your point. Yeah. Often I held it before. Like, I know it really well.
Yeah.
But this is why I think it's wrong, and this is where it can change. And then that's how I try to engage in public with discussions. Like, trying not to score points.
I love that. I think that's really helpful. I think a lot of our listeners will find that really helpful as well.
Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
Well, I was just going to totally change the subject. So,
well, so was I, because I wanted to talk about NeoA. So
yeah, well, let's talk about NeoA then.
Yeah. So, Greg, I know back when I did your course, Reconciling Biomechanics with Pain Science, and by the way, if you are a listener and you haven't done Greg's course yet, highly recommend you do it. It's freaking awesome. And Greg, you can do it
online now.
You can do it online now, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, I think that's one of the coolest things that's happened from this last 18 plus months is that all these, opportunities now are to study with some of the most awesome people out there in the industry. You can do it online now, regardless of where you are in the world. I prefer it in person.
The online is the information dump. Like
right.
There's more material in the online than in the in-person. But what's nice about the in-person is we have discussions and debates and challenges. That's why when you do the online, you get to use it as a credit to the in-person. That's sort of the idea.
With your online, is it live? Is it recorded?
It's pre-recorded. It's like, how do you get all this information out there? So the ideas, and then case studies, and then research. Because you can't do that in person. It's too boring. It's too much. It's just a wall of info.
So we get more of your jokes, etc. in person. We get to experience more of your personality, which is awesome. But back when I did your course, so that must have been a good couple of years ago now, you had just started talking about you were creating your amazing resource, NeoA.
OA Optimism.
OA Optimism.
Yeah, I always forget the name too.
OA Optimism. So I'd love to hear a bit more about that because I found that resource to be really helpful and I have sent that on to quite a few clients actually. What was because you've just put that out as a free resource, haven't you?
Yeah, it's just free. It's just a series of like 3 to 7 minute videos explaining osteoarthritis and what you can do to help yourself. That's it. Trying to there's some debunking because that's where there's a lot of poor messaging in that area. So there's some debunk videos. There's what's pain, why does it hurt, and then what can you do, and then sort of a simple exercise library. Because it's another area where, again, we overcomplicate exercises, which really bothers me. Exercise should just be for everyone to do. I hate the videos where people make fun of people in the gym and all that stupid stuff. Just get moving sometimes. And that OA is absolutely that get moving is fantastic.
Yeah, I don't like those videos either. Actually, I get I'm like, why are we poking fun at someone who's having a go at moving? Who is moving, we should be encouraging them. But
and I started too because there's the GLAD program, which I quite like as well. But I think it overcomplicates things. It makes it too difficult, makes exercise more special than it is. Makes people who give out the exercise have to have special training, and in some countries even have to be physios. And I'm like, no, you don't have to be a physio to prescribe exercise for so many different conditions. So the fewer gates or fences, what's that called? Gatekeeping? You're obstacles in the way, the better. That was the idea.
Why particularly NeoA?
Oh, it's because it's so common. Right, okay. Knee and hip OA. We just have knee and hip. There's more evidence that exercise helps with NeoA. Hip OA is less researched.
Right.
Yeah. And OA, of course, is osteoarthritis.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So can you give us the 60-second master's degree in exercise for knee osteoarthritis?
Yeah. It's the same as low back pain. It's do something for your knee. Do something for your hip, do something for your foot, get more active in general, walking, hiking, swimming, it doesn't matter. Look at all of the areas in your life where you can be healthier, your coping skills, your social life, you're allowed to poke into pain if it hurts, sleep better, manage your stress, understand pain better. It's the same as everything, right? All of these things can help with NeoA. Don't expect to be pain-free. That's not fair. But don't assume that you have to stop your life because you have NeoA, and don't assume that it's progressive. It's not. most people stay at sort of the same level for years, or they get better, right? You're not doomed once you have that diagnosis.
But obviously I can't run or do deep squats.
Well, you can't because you suck. But that has nothing to do with your NeoA.
But I couldn't play the violin before.
Could you run before? And no, you can't play the violin after this rehab program. So yeah, that's what's so great is you can run. It's the whole thing, like this concept of wear and tear, where like physical loading is dramatically driving this like changes in tissue isn't well supported, and that's NeoA is perfect for that. Same with the spine. Like load is a force for good. You just got to find the right balance between load and recovery. But that's the same with everything. The NeoA doesn't change that at all.
I would love to just talk, you've kind of sparked my interest here. I'd love to just talk a little bit about some of the lines of evidence for OA not being a, quote, wear and tear condition, because I think that is like most people listening to this is probably that's their kind of what they were taught when they were a kid, is that osteoarthritis is caused by, quote, wear and tear, like running wears down your knees, etc. Yeah. And so that's why we like to, we often advertise exercises like, oh, this is low impact or no impact, so it's good for your joints.
Yeah.
So
it's the irony. It's just that we don't I think if you're loading yourself at an extreme high level, like either occupation or sport, and just not recovering and maybe causing actual damage because the loads are like just so ridiculously high, then yeah, load might be a little bit related to osteoarthritis.
And that's sort of like the ultra marathoner, obsessive triathlete level.
Yeah, there's probably some training issues going on there, or you injure yourself when like you tear your ACL when you, as a 17-year-old girl, she's more predisposed, or it's just probably more bad training, I would say, just not smart training. But the average person who's just physically active in the workplace or just running 3 to 5 days a week and strength training and lifting heavy loads, it's just not there. The research isn't there that more stress on the joint leads to, more degeneration. And my favorite study is one where they were telling people you had to lose weight. This is a Messier and a Henriksen study. They're like, oh, you have to lose weight. You have to get less load on your knee for you to recover. And people did lose weight, which is hard to do. But then what they realized was when these people were walking, they were putting more stress on their knee. It's ironic. So they lost weight, but they had more knee load. And they're like, oh no, what have we done? The law of unintended consequences here. So there's more load on the knee. And they thought, oh, we better follow these people. So they followed them for 18 months with the more knee load. And they weren't any worse off. There was not more degenerative changes over time. So even like the idea of being overweight being a cause for NeoA, it's associated with pain and disability, but it's probably not the load or the physical stress on the knee.
Right.
More of these metabolic
because people who are overweight also have more, say, arthritis in their fingers, for example. And then there are also just studies that find that, most of the, I'm probably going to get this back to front, but most OA is in the medial compartment. Whereas, people in Valgus, the load's more on the lateral compartment, one way or the other anyway. Basically they find that where the OA is radiographically, like on an MRI or whatever, doesn't correlate with actually the positions of maximum pressure within the knee joint.
That one's a bit mixed. If you look at the work of Sharma, her stuff, so people who have varus, so if you go into varus like you're riding a horse, like knock knees, that'll compress the medial compartment. And so it slightly increases your risk of incidence. So like the first time OA by 10 to 15%, but still tiny. And then it's associated with progression. But valgus, it's not related. So valgus, when your knee goes in, there'd be more lateral. That doesn't seem, maybe it's a bit associated with progression, but not incidence. It's not that big of a deal. And then the coolest part, this is when you try to change varus, like the knock knee, people get better, but you don't change what's called the varus whip, or the technical term is like the knee adduction moment. So I used to try to really read that. I won't advise it to you. It's a mess. And you're like, and remember, it's posture. It's not like how you move. It's probably a postural change that you can't do anything about. It's just the shape of the bones. So I just stopped reading it. It's such a mess. So I didn't mean to disagree with you, but it's messy and it's worth not thinking about.
There's also that's interesting to me what you say about the obesity or losing weight, because that was a standard advice that I was taught in my degree is 10% weight reduction equals X number of points of VAS pain reduction, for people with osteoarthritis. But I was always taught that was more an inflammatory biomarker thing rather than because if you look at like people who are have a high BMI but they're muscular, so like athletes and stuff, well, they don't necessarily have the same OA pain or whatever as people who are obese with the same BMI. And also, I mean, there's again, I can't remember the name of the study, but I'm pretty sure there's like an inverse U-shaped relationship, like you said, with sort of cartilage thickness, where basically people who are doing extreme amounts of activity have less knee health or more OA, and people who are completely sedentary have more OA, and people who are moderately active seem to have less. I seem to remember that, or maybe that was disc health. I can't remember.
I think I know your paper you're talking about, and I think they started with that conclusion. I'll send it to you. I actually went through that and I found a mistake in one of their graphs and I started tweeting about it. I didn't understand. I'm like, this is completely wrong. And it turns out they had the wrong graph when they put it in. That's really funny. I think they just started that idea because when you looked at it, it didn't really support, like the people who were, it was step one, right? Taking lots of steps. Was it high steps and high BMI?
No, that wasn't it.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a paper that tries to say that. And I was like, why are you telling people the more steps they take, the more likely they are to have OA? Because all it said, because if you're telling people you want them to lose weight and then you say, but don't take a lot of steps, you're fucking
That's
people.
nuts.
Yeah.
And so when you really looked at that, the risk was just high BMI. It wasn't high steps or high load. That was it, right? And so what I would like to see a study is people do the actions to try to lose weight, but they don't lose weight, but they just try to be healthier. I would guess that they would have less pain as well. So we see that. That's why exercise is so great. You don't have to lose weight and you can be doing quite well. Like losing weight is just one option. But for so many people, you will doom them. They will just think, well, what's the point? I can't lose weight. I've been trying to lose weight for 30 years.
Yeah.
But you're worried of some of that, the advice out there that's like the commonly accepted advice from the OA like groups, like the governing bodies or whatever, national bodies. And that.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to look through my EndNote library here, and I found three actually big recent systematic reviews in the last 2 years that have looked at running and knee cartilage, but they've all looked at the short-term
and it's
effects
association
of running.
stuff. And
Yeah.
There's some association studies where, super elite athletes have more OA.
But good news is these three systematic reviews also found that basically running has basically when you run, you hydrate your cartilage, you squish the nutrients through the hyaline cartilage inside the joint, which is a good thing. And you also compress the cartilage, so your cartilage is a bit squeezed immediately after you run, but it basically plumps back up again within 24 hours. Yeah.
It's JF stuff. JF Esculier, was that one of the authors there?
Yep.
We're good buddies.
I could tell. So, Chloe, is there anything else you wanted to
I'm just looking at my little.
talk about with Greg?
Had a little list of things I wanted to. Oh yeah. I don't feel like we can have a discussion with Greg without talking about trampolining and skateboarding. So for me, as I said, Greg, you've helped shape a lot of my critical thinking and thoughts around movement in the world, which is, it's quite profound. So thank you. But I just love the fact that as an adult, you've taken up these two things. You know, you took up the trampolining and the somersaulting, etc., and then more recently skateboarding. And you've actually, for those that don't know, Greg's like built his own skateboard ramps basically in his backyard. And like, can you what led you to want to do those?
I was just bored. I was just bored with running.
Right.
I used to run a lot. I just didn't feel fit. So I got back into gymnastics. And then like with my kids, I was going to their tumbling classes. They were like 8 and 6 and I was the 43 or whatever. It was a bit weird, cheerleading. And then that wasn't enough. So I started training on my own and going to adult gymnastics. And then because my shoulder last year, I couldn't put my arm over my head. I started skateboarding and all of that stuff just to try some. And then and I didn't mean to, but I guess skateboarding's incredibly popular now with old people. It's like this, I'm wearing a Later Skaters t-shirt for all these old people that picked it up. It's so funny.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
So I just got bored with running. That was it.
Okay. It's fantastic. I love it. Hopefully it inspire. The last time I went skateboarding was when I jumped on my brother's skateboard and I very quickly fell off and landed really hard on my coccyx bone. And I'm not going to lie, it kind of gave me a little bit of a,
A lot of Canadians I know seem to be, maybe it's just a limited sample of people I know, but most of the Canadians that I can bring to mind that I know seem to be very outdoorsy. So like, you guys seem to love, hiking and trail running and rock climbing and swimming and
I live in Toronto.
Mountain biking.
So if you live in BC or Alberta, Toronto is not so good for that.
Right.
So not me.
But I don't know. You told us you're going rock climbing.
Oh, that's inside. So it's actually plastic climbing. What it is.
We're imagining you scaling I don't know, what's the big mountain range you've got there in Canada? I'm imagining you going
there's
inside the Rockies.
That's where the elite rock climbers are, but I wouldn't go there. Yeah. No, I'm just going bouldering tonight.
Bouldering. I love it. Well, yeah, that was the only other, I was just curious about what led Greg to, gymnastics and skateboarding.
Well, Greg, if you could put something on a billboard for our listeners, what would you put to finish off?
I would tell them to vote for another prime minister. I don't know.
Yes, thank you.
I don't know
Happy to
anything
put that
about
on a billboard.
I didn't say that.
That was a spot on, Greg.
I might have got that from you.
You might have. Sorry.
No, I don't know. It'd be something like cheesy, like keep it up. Honestly, that sort of is my mantra. Like, I don't know what people. I was making fun of myself when I said I was doing tumbling with my girls at gymnastics because I'd see all the other parents just sitting there, and they think I'm the loser. I'm like, you're the loser. So that's what's on the billboard. Because I'm like, it's so late.
You're the loser.
You turn like 40. You just have to sit and watch your kids do stuff. I was like, screw this. I'm going to ruin this for my children. But I'm going to stay fit.
I love it. You've kind of inspired. You've totally inspired me to take up something that maybe I'd kind of put in the past. I'm thinking I might go back.
Unless it's chess.
Well, Bintu does gymnastics once we get out of lockdown on a Thursday or Tuesday or something. Can't remember which day anymore because it's been so long. But you can come along and join in if you want, Chloe.
Will you join in, Raph?
If you do, I will.
Okay. It sounds like we're going to do gymnastics.
We'll
I love
embarrass
it.
the living shit out of my poor daughter.
We will embarrass
She's
the
14.
hell out of her. Mortify. Well, thank you, Greg.
Perfect timing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.